Hello, everybody. Welcome to our next training session. I'm Jeff Carlotta from Beyond the Range. And once again, on the call today, we're going to have retired U.S. Marshal Charlie Moore working with us. Today, we're going to be talking about accessing your firearm when it's on you, how to draw in different types of draws, and really how to get to a more productive and more effective type situation where you're able to get on target a little bit sooner. So, Charlie, welcome to our call today.
Hey, Jeff, how you doing? Thanks for the invite.
Hey, no problem. We love to have you here. So one of the things that, if you go back to my early days of firearms, now I got my pistol permit in 1989. I was a martial artist back then, and I really thought that with my reaction time that I would be able to draw my firearm out from concealment fairly easy and fairly quick. But the more training I did back in the early 90s, the more I realized I wasn't efficient with it at all. And I was actually taking what I thought was good, 3 to 4 seconds to get my weapon out and get it on target, but then realizing under pressure that that's way too slow. So Charlie, what's the important to having a good solid draw and practicing a draw over and over?
Well, Jeff, thanks a lot. We got to talk about, like you said, you mentioned it, concealment. I kind of learned this the last time I was up with your group, is lots of folks, for whatever reason, maybe the range, maybe time, haven't shot from concealment, but they carry concealed. And obviously, we could talk about a variety of different holsters and concealment positions. But I kind of teach is, look, if it's really, really concealed, then it's really, really concealed for you to get to it. So it's very important. This is a skill builder, Jeff, as you know, is once we get to the weapon, we got to talk about grip and things. But today we're just going to focus on accessing it. And I'm going to use kind of an outside of the pant holster. I believe you have an inside of the pant holster, but the methodology of getting to the weapon, whether it's appendix carry inside the waistband or 3 o'clock carry outside the waistband, is kind of the same. And I'm going to give you 3 basic fundamentals to just get to that weapon. And then down the road, like you said, we can talk about grip and target acquisition and things of that nature.
Fantastic. And let me talk about this before we proceed with the video. I know you're using a training gun as well. I'm using a CERT, so yours is definitely not a real firearm as well. If anybody's ever going to practice the draw, they definitely got to make sure that they're using a unloaded firearm. Make sure there's no rounds even near it. If you're going to put the magazine in there, make sure there's no rounds in the magazine. Really train safe for that, because in the beginning especially, you're going to make mistakes. Your finger might hit the trigger, that firearm may fall, and you're going to have issues. So anytime that you're doing any kind of training like this, make sure your firearm is fully unloaded and there's no rounds even in the same room with you, just for safety. So let's talk, Charlie. What's the different types of draws you're going to be working us on?
Jeff, again, these are going to be really, really basic. And again, this is exposed, which, the open carry debate can go on forever. We're going to talk about, like you said, concealed. So I'm going to take my shirt, my t-shirt, and put it over my weapon. I've got mine at about 2:30, 3 o'clock on my right hip. The first one is I learned it as a double rake, meaning both hands are going to be involved. So with this draw, I'm going to turn a little bit side to the camera so you can see, is my strong side hand for my, or the dominant hand, if you will. For me, is my right hand. I'm going to lift the shirt. I'm going to give it to my left hand, kind of on the thumb, and I'm going to pull it across, because if I don't, sometimes I get it caught in my shirt or in my clothing or the cloth. So the weapon comes up, I pass it off, and I bring it tight into my compressed frame area so the weapon can come out, and then we begin our draw and our grip from there. So I kind of named it, and I kind of learned it as a double rake, meaning both hands are involved.
All right, so Charlie, when we're talking about the double rake or any draw for that matter, one big issue is the clothing getting caught on the firearm. So in the example that you're just using with the double rake, and you're using your dominant hand or your shooting hand to get the first grab, feeding it into the thumb of the other hand and then pulling across, it's very important to have this tight to the body. All right, if this is loose and I try to pull that firearm up, there's a good chance I'm going to get caught on that shirt. So I know people teach this differently, so I wanted to ask your opinion on it. Do you feel the need to, once you get it clear of the firearm, just go across? Or do you think to go a little bit higher than across is a little bit safer? So, and again, this is talking about the double rake, the one you just kind of demonstrated.
Great point, Jeff. With the double rake, again, there are a variety of different ways, variety of different thought processes on this. So my strong or my dominant side hand is going to raise it. It's got to clear the weapon or clear the carrying device. it passes it off to the web or the thumb of the finger, if you will. And I think personally for me is I bring it into an area I'm familiar with, that area right in here where I may go to the Sewell position that we've talked about, or a compressed frame, and the weapon meets it there so it can go into whatever grip methodology that you use. So again, great question, Jeff, is first it's got to clear. I've got to be, you know, as you mentioned, with a safe dry weapon, we don't need to be at the range to practice these things. Put on whatever clothes or garb and clothing that you wear and practice this. Raise it, bring it across. I like that area that I'm used to. If I'm down here, I get confused, or it gets not to be muscle memory, if you will. If I'm up too high, same thing. So I bring it right across to the, I call it the compressed frame area, or that Sewell position area, if you will, right here in the center of our body. Our center line is a pretty good reference point for these kind of draws and for any kind of tactical draw, really.
All right, well, that's a great point. That's why I asked that, because I know a lot of people teach it differently, and I just wanted to kind of get your impression on it. And I just picked up on one more thing watching you do this, and I think it's a valid point that we need to bring out, is when you are pulling that shirt up, whether you're talking, you know, using just the left hand in my case, or the right then the left, and you're placing it in the thumb, you're not using that hand to just kind of grab the shirt. Because now as I go to draw and I kind of join my hand in, I may be like, I'm trying to show you, I may be like having my shirt stuck on the firearm. So by keeping it in the thumb position, here, when you draw that firearm out, now you can release that shirt and then kind of get a proper grip on that firearm. So would you say using that thumb is definitely an important tip?
Well, I think that's a great point, Jeff, because like I said, and I think when we do our training, you have to train through the failure parts because, like you said, things happen. You may drop your weapon. That may happen in the real world, and it may certainly happen in training, is if you get your weapon stuck in your clothing while you're practicing, you restart. But hey, if that happens, we have to deal with it. So we talk about that in our classes. But like you said, I bring it up, I put it here so it's ready to access it. If I start grabbing, I have more things to release, especially when we talk about stress in all our classes. Now I've got to release that stressful grip. And that's why we also talk about one-handed shooting, because I may have to engage with the shirt in my hand. But absolutely, like you said, I bring that up, I bring it here so it's ready to go and come out to whatever shooting platform we're going to build on.
Fantastic. All right, so that one is called the double rake. All right, which
Yes,
draw are we going to go to next?
Well, when you think about the double rake, meaning two hands, that's something where you have time. Maybe you see something happening in a distance. You have that situational awareness. I recognize there's going to be, or there may be an issue. That way I have time. The next one is I have what I call, or what I've been taught as a single rake, meaning one hand involvement. Our non-dominant hand, again, I'll turn sideways, is going to reach across and bring that shirt up. And you can see mine got snagged a little bit, but I have to clear it. Then the weapon comes out and everything else is going to be the same. But this thing, this difference is the terminology of single rake, meaning one hand, and in this case, my left hand. Again, it reaches across and it brings it up, and it may get caught. We have to clear it and get by it, and then go into one-handed shooting, two-handed shooting, whatever the situation dictates. So again, one more time from the side, it's now my left hand that brings it up into that position you talked about, Jeff. I don't need to change different things. Different garments may dictate a little bit of change, but I want everything to be as consistent as it can be for muscle memory. And then I go into my shooting platform, again, dictated by the situation.
Now, one of the things that I've noticed, because I've been practicing kind of all different draws, is I really find that on the double rake, I back up just a little bit here. On the double rake, I kind of guided over that firearm a little bit earlier as I hand it off. But on the single rake, for me, I find that if I go across too soon, I'm almost always catching the firearm. So for me, especially because typically I carry it about 3 o'clock, it's a little bit farther behind. I really find that I have to kind of come up high and almost into my armpit and then over, kind of get it nice and tight and get it clear. And I know you talked about dealing with failures, what happens if you get caught on your shirt, but do you agree that on the single rake, you may need to go up a little bit higher first before you cut it off, depending on where you carry?
I agree with the premise, and I agree also that whatever methodology works for you to get that weapon out, because we're talking about a life-threatening situation, is whether it's come up high or learn where that is, learn the distance of my carry. That's why, as you mentioned, Jeff, practice is so important. I know just about where it is to get to it. And again, the more we talk about carry methodologies, toward the center line is sometimes easier to get it out because I feel easier than, like you said, pulling it across, and sometimes it gets snagged. But that's a great point, Jeff, is we got to be almost perfectly aware of when our weapon is cleared and when it's not. And that's when practice, just as you mentioned, Jeff, safe practice comes in so vitally important.
Fantastic. So far we have the double rake using two hands. We have the single rake using our non-dominant hand. And let's go into our third draw. What's our third draw, Charlie?
This is the hardest, but in my opinion, the most important when we think about self-defense with a handgun is primary hand or strong hand or dominant hand drawing. Means this hand is doing something else. Maybe I'm engaged, like you talked about, with someone that I'm fighting over a weapon or over something, and my weapon is not out. We practice a lot with our weapons out, and we're really good at it, even in the law enforcement community. But getting to that weapon in the negative aspect of an environment is my hand's got to clear it. This hand is busy, and we have the tendency to bring it over to help, but it's busy. Maybe I'm on the phone. Maybe I have a flashlight. Maybe I'm opening a door. Maybe I'm in an engagement here. So this is a harder drill, but it's most important is I have to clear that garment, whatever, in this case, a t-shirt, from the weapon, access the weapon, and then engage. In this situation that I gave you, we may not have two-handed shooting. This may be close quarter shooting or one-handed shooting because of the situation I presented, that this hand is not available to us. So I call this primary hand draw for close quarter situations. If I turn sideways, maybe I'm engaged with something over here. I have to clear my weapon and then get out into a close quarter position. So this is, I don't mind or care which one you practice with your two hands when we have distance, but this hand, you have to practice your primary draw because this hand may be involved in something else. So it's vitally important to your safety, your family's safety, if you're carrying a weapon for self-defense, that I can get to it while this hand is busy doing something else. So this one you have to practice, the other two based on your personal choice and the situation presented to you.
Well, I think that's a good point about practice, but let's be honest, it really should practice all three.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like a shooting stance. Are you going to work from the isosceles or a weaver stance, or kind of in the middle of, you know, running or moving type shooting? So I think they really got to get it all three. They're going to have a favorite one, but really practice all three just in case. Charlie, I'm going to ask a couple details on this one because I think this is important. Like you said, you might be opening up a door. You may have a flashlight in your hand. You may be on the phone with the police on 911, and like you said, you have to draw that firearm out. So come on forward just a little bit so that we can see if you turn sideways towards your left, I believe it is. When you draw that out, I saw that a lot of times you're feeding the shirt to almost the backside of your hand. So you're drawing it and you're feeding it here, almost like your thumb's against you. Then you're sliding down. And it's
that way, Jeff, I'm kind of using, sorry for the interruption there with the delay, but I'm kind of using my body as an index point. Again, it depends on what garment we have on. I don't want to get it snagged on something else, but I know where it is and I know how to clear it and bring it out. For example, the great question you asked and the great example is maybe I am opening a door, which is off to my left camera, and somebody comes rushing out the door. My natural response, my behavioral response as a human is to back up and put this hand out. This hand must clear my weapon. Say maybe that person has a weapon or a knife or edge weapon of some type, and I must draw from there while this hand, as you mentioned, Jeff, is occupied. So that was a fantastic question.
Right, so I just want to kind of reiterate it. So the value to doing this is putting it, I'm trying to raise up a little bit higher so you guys can see on the camera, is kind of using the back of your hand to hold it against your body. And not out here. One of the last times you were up here teaching, you know, people were pulling their shirt up and then they were releasing it, trying to grab their firearm, and the shirt was falling back on the firearm before they could get their hand there. So by trapping it to the body and using that backside of the thumb, keeps that shirt in place so you can slide down and access that. So would you say that's a fair assessment on that?
Yeah, Jeff, I think it was, both, or the few questions that you put together are fantastic. Is think about what we were talking about with the double rake, is passing it off to the same, I don't want to say the same exact because, you know, it's not literal, but that same kind of grip, if you will, of the thumb is kind of the same thing I'm working here. So my hand isn't, like I said, I have to know through practice that you and I have been reiterating where my weapon is, that if I drop it from here, it covers it back up again, potentially. So I get that weapon out. I have to know where it is. Again, this one wants to help, but it's not available. So maybe it's over here engaged. So I have to be able to clear it and deal with that close quarter situation, that one-handed shooting, if you will.
All right, fantastic. Charlie, I'm going to ask you just to do a quick review one more time of the 3 different draws. Now, obviously, we're not talking about ankle holsters. We're not talking about drawing from purses or briefcases. We're not talking about a cross draw. We're just talking from kind of concealed carry on the waist. Give us a review of the 3 different types of draws.
Okay, Jeff, the way I learned it and the terminology I learned is double rake. If you have a favorite terminology, that's fine too. Double rake, meaning both of my hands. I kind of see this one and envision it in usage with distance. I have some kind of pre-attack or pre-assault indicators. My situation awareness is good. I bring my right hand, my dominant hand, in my case, my shooting hand, up. I bring the shirt or the garment up. I pass it off to the center line, wherever that center line is to you as a shooter, as a handgun owner. Then the weapon comes out. I go into whatever shooting platform we're talking about. The next one we talked about is a single rake or single hand clearance from concealment or access to the weapon. This time my hand, my shooting hand, my right hand in my case, goes to the weapon. As you mentioned, I must clear the weapon. If that means for you coming up a little higher, using your body as an index point to know where that garment is, fantastic. Weapon comes out, and then again, it goes to the shooting platform dictated by the situation. And the last one we talked about, which is kind of frustrating if you've just done it the first time, that dominant hand, the shooting hand only draw, primary hand, is this hand is busy. I'm going to draw and clear with the same hand. I access my weapon, and then I come on to target based on the situation presented. So as you said, we have the double rake or the two-handed, the single rake or the one hand, and the primary hand, the shooting hand, draw from, clear access from concealment. And those are the 3 basic ones that we teach to build, and then we must work on our grip and our platforms and things like that down the road.
Awesome. I love it. I'm just going to ask you one quick question for you. So you have an outside the waistband holster right now. So let's say your shirt was kind of tucked in like it is, and you had on a jacket instead of having your shirt over it. The only real difference in that draw is you may not want to pull that jacket up, because especially in New York, it's a heavy winter jacket. It's all going to bunch up here and give you issues. With it unzipped, you're going to want to sweep it back and then come to the firearm. Would you agree that with a jacket, again, you're going to want to practice it depending on the weather and where you live?
Yeah, I think exactly right. Down here in the South, we don't have those heavy coats most of the time like you guys do up north. Is maybe a hoodie if you wear one. Maybe that's kind of like a t-shirt, but a little heavier. So you're going to have to experiment with what you said. If your jacket is zipped, again, I think it goes back to just a heavier, bulkier t-shirt that you're going to have to work with. If it is unzipped, or maybe I use the West Freeway church shooting as an example, is maybe you have a sport coat on or an unzipped jacket, is how to sweep that to get to it. And I recommend putting something slightly heavier, keys or a phone even, or whatever, into that side pocket, so it does have some mass to it, so it swings. Because if it doesn't, it goes back to what you and I have been speaking of, is the garment will swing back and then cover that weapon. So those are things that, as you mentioned, whatever you wear, wherever you carry, you have to practice, guys, but you have to practice safely before we get to live fire or simulations fire.
All right, Charlie, I want to thank you again. We hope you guys enjoyed the video. And as we finish up, remember, if you're going to practice any of these draws, we ask you to make sure that your firearm is 100% unloaded and 100% safe. Don't even have rounds in the magazine. Don't even have rounds in the room. Make it safe when you're practicing, because you want to be able to go slow and go safe, but as you speed it up, you might have some issues with that. So, Charlie, thanks again for your knowledge. We love you sharing with us and working with us, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Take care, Jeff. Thank you very much.